My mother always told me, prioritize the essentials. Gabrielle. It was her favorite mantra, usually delivered while she was adjusting her jewelry in the rearview mirror or scrolling through Zillow listings for houses she couldn't afford. For 29 years, I thought she was teaching me discipline. I thought she was teaching me how to build a life of value. But standing in my empty kitchen, staring at a bank notification that would shatter my entire existence, I finally understood the subtext. I wasn't the essential. I was the overhead cost, the maintenance fee, the silent partner in a family business called Appearances Incorporated. And like any good business, when the profit margins got tight, they started cutting costs. I just never realized the first thing they would cut was me. Before we go further, drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever felt like the backup plan in your own family? I'm reading every single one. I design spaces for a living. I understand how structure dictates emotion, how a low ceiling creates intimacy, how a long sightline creates anticipation. So, when I planned my wedding in Scottsdale, I designed it with the precision of a master blueprint. The venue was a modernist glass pavilion in the high desert, surrounded by saguaro cacti that stood like sentinels against the violet sky. Every angle was calculated, every shadow was intentional, except for the structural failure in the front row. 4 chairs, that was the gap. 4 empty, gold-rimmed Chiavari chairs with little ivory cards that read, reserved. In architectural terms, negative space is supposed to give the eye a place to rest, but this negative space wasn't restful. It was a sinkhole. It was a void that pulled the gravity of the entire room into it, warping the joy of everyone who walked past. I stood in the bridal suite, smoothing the silk of my dress, waiting for my father to walk through the door. He was 20 minutes late. Then 30. My phone buzzed on the vanity. It wasn't a call. It was a text from my mother, Susan. Olivia is having a severe mental health episode. She needs us. We can't leave her side. We know you'll understand. You're the strong one. And then, the follow-up text that severed the last tendon of my loyalty. Please don't make a scene about this, Gabrielle. In the grand scheme of things, a wedding is just a party. Let's not get worked up over something so trivial when your sister's well-being is at stake. Trivial. That word landed on my chest like a cinder block. My marriage to Ethan, the man who actually saw me, who actually loved me, was trivial. The life I was building was trivial. I didn't cry. Crying ruins the makeup, and I had paid a fortune for the photographer. Instead, I walked over to the window and looked out at the guests taking their seats. I watched Ethan standing at the altar, looking nervous and hopeful, checking his watch. Then, my phone buzzed again. An Instagram notification. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. It was a story update from my mother's account, Susan Sells Scottsdale. The video wasn't from a hospital room. It wasn't from a therapist's office. It was a panning shot of a turquoise ocean, white sand, and 2 feet, with perfectly pedicured toes resting on a lounge chair. The geolocation tag read, 4 Seasons Resort, Maui. And there was Olivia, my in-crisis sister, in the background of the shot, holding a mimosa and laughing, her head thrown back in pure, unadulterated joy. The caption was a string of palm tree emojis, and the hashtag number Healing Journey. They hadn't just skipped my wedding, they had traded it for a vacation. They were literally drinking champagne on a beach, while I was standing alone in a wedding dress, staring at 4 empty chairs that screamed to 300 guests that I wasn't worth showing up for. I felt a coldness spread through my veins, replacing the heat of the desert afternoon. It wasn't sadness. Sadness is warm. It's messy. This was ice. This was the clarity of a demolition expert, looking at a condemned building and knowing exactly where to place the charges. I put the phone down. I wiped a smudge of lipstick from the corner of my mouth. I walked out of that suite, walked down the aisle alone, and I married the love of my life. But as I said my vows, a part of me was already drafting the blueprints for a wall so high and so thick that they would never, ever be able to climb over it again. When Ethan and I returned from our honeymoon, I expected silence. I expected the awkward, heavy quiet of people who know they have done something unforgivable and are waiting to see if they will be punished. But I forgot who I was dealing with. My parents don't do silence, they do spin control. It started with a wedding gift from my Aunt Linda, it was returned to sender. Then, a cold email from my cousin, uninviting us to the family Labor Day barbecue. I didn't understand what was happening until I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. She looked at me with pity, clutching her purse a little tighter. "It's a shame about your breakdown, Gabrielle," she whispered, leaning over the produce bin. "Susan told us how you screamed at her, how you banned them from the wedding because they wouldn't buy you that $10,000 dress. I hope you're getting the help you need." I stood there, holding a bag of lemons, and felt the ground shift. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had preemptively struck. They knew their absence would look bad. So they invented a narrative where they were the victims. They were the heartbroken parents exiled by a tyrannical, mentally unstable bridezilla. It was a masterclass in toxic public relations. They had isolated me. They had cut my supply lines to the rest of the family so that when the truth finally came out, nobody would believe the crazy daughter. I didn't correct the neighbor. I didn't argue. I just nodded, paid for my groceries, and walked out. Arguing with a rumor is like fighting smoke. You just exhaust yourself while the fire keeps burning. Then, the phone rang. It was my father, Gregory. He didn't ask about the honeymoon. He didn't ask how I was. His voice was clipped, efficient, the tone of a property manager demanding late rent. "The loan payments are past due, Gabrielle," he said. "The bank called the house line this morning. You need to handle this immediately. It is affecting our liquidity." I put the phone on speaker and set it on the kitchen counter. Ethan stopped chopping vegetables and looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What loan?" I asked. "I don't have any loans, Gregory. My car is paid off. My house is in my name." "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "The SBA loan. The startup capital for Gabrielle's family consultancy. The payment is $3,000 a month, and the grace period ended yesterday. We need you to wire the funds to the business account by 5 o'clock, or we're going to have a problem with the credit bureau." I froze. Gabrielle's family consultancy. I had never heard of it. I had never signed paperwork for it, but suddenly, the math of their lifestyle, the Hawaii trip, the new leased Range Rover, the constant country club dinners made terrifying sense. $92,000. That was the principal amount he casually mentioned, as if he were asking me to pick up a tab for lunch. In that moment, the logic of their betrayal finally clicked into place. It wasn't just greed. It was something deeper. Something structural in their psychology. It was the narcissistic injury equation. To Gregory and Susan, I wasn't an independent human being. I was an asset they had manufactured. They gave me life. Therefore, they owned my credit score. In their minds, forging my signature wasn't fraud. It was simply collecting dividends on an investment they had made 29 years ago. They truly believed they were entitled to ruin me because they had created me. "I didn't sign for a loan, Gregory," I said, my voice steady, cold. "We signed it for you," he replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "As your agents. We're building a legacy here, Gabrielle. Stop being so selfish and just make the transfer. Do you want to ruin your mother's credit over a technicality?" A technicality. Federal fraud was a technicality. "Send me the account details," I said. "I'll look into it." 5 o'clock, he warned. "Don't disappoint us again." He hung up. I looked at Ethan. He didn't say a word. He just walked over to his laptop, opened a terminal window, and cracked his knuckles. The air in the kitchen didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like the calm before a very precise, very destructive storm. I stood there for a long time after the call ended, staring at the blank screen of my phone. I felt dirty. It was a visceral sensation, like I had been covered in a thin film of oil. They hadn't just asked for money, they had manufactured a reality where I owed it to them. They had forged my consent. "Give me the phone," Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud, it wasn't angry. It was the voice he used when a server crashed at work or when he detected a breach in a client's firewall. It was the voice of containment. I handed it to him. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me like I was a crime scene that needed to be secured. He took the phone, walked into his home office, and booted up his primary workstation. I followed him, pulling up a chair, watching as he navigated through banking portals and credit bureaus with a speed that was almost terrifying. "I'm pulling your full credit history," he said, his eyes scanning the dual monitors, not the consumer report. The deep dive. The one that shows every inquiry, every hard pull, every account attached to your social security number in the last 5 years. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic clacking of his mechanical keyboard. It wasn't a frantic search, it was surgical. Here it is, he said after 3 minutes. Small Business Administration loan. Application date, 6 months ago. He clicked a file. A PDF opened on the screen. It was a loan application for $92,000. And there, at the bottom, was my signature. Or rather, a signature that looked vaguely like mine, if I had signed it while drunk and blindfolded. It was shaky. It was hesitant. It was a forgery so lazy, it was almost insulting. Look at the IP address on the electronic filing, Ethan said, pointing to a string of numbers in the metadata. That's not us. That traces back to a residential connection in Scottsdale. Specifically, your parents' house. He kept digging. He wasn't just looking for the loan, he was looking for the money. He followed the wire transfer trail. The funds hadn't gone to office space or marketing or payroll. They had hit a business account named Gabrielle's Family Consultancy LLC, a shell company registered to my father, and then immediately drained out in a series of personal transfers. Four Seasons Maui, Ethan read from the ledger on the screen. $12,000. Range Rover lease down payment. $8,000. Country club dues. $3,000. He spun the chair around to face me. They didn't start a business, Gabrielle. They started a slush fund. They used your credit score to finance the vacation they took instead of coming to your wedding. I looked at the screen. The dates lined up perfectly. The deposit hit their account 3 days before my wedding. The first withdrawal for the resort was made the morning I was walking down the aisle. They had toasted to my absence with champagne bought in my name. This isn't a family dispute, Ethan said, leaning back, his face hard. This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is a federal crime that carries a prison sentence of up to 30 years. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction. Waiting to see if I would crumble or defend them. I looked at the signature again, that shaky, fake scrawl. It represented the total lack of respect they had for me. They didn't think I was smart enough to check. They didn't think I was strong enough to fight back. I didn't feel the urge to cry anymore. I felt something else. I felt the cold, hard click of a lock snapping into place. Print it, I said. Print everything. The bank records were the weapon, but we still needed the motive. We needed something that would prove this wasn't just a financial misunderstanding, but a calculated act of malice. Ethan didn't stop at the bank ledger. He closed the financial windows and opened a new suite of tools, audio isolation software, and a social media archiver. Your mother posts everything, he muttered, his eyes tracking a download progress bar. Narcissists always leave a digital trail, because they can't imagine a world where they aren't the heroes of the story. He pulled up the video file from the Four Seasons in Maui. It was the same one I had seen on my wedding day, the panning shot of the ocean, the feet on the lounge chair, but this time, Ethan wasn't looking at the image. He was looking at the waveform of the audio track. She put music over this on Instagram, he said. Generic tropical house music. But the raw audio file, in the microphone, picked up the ambient noise underneath the track before she layered it. He typed a command. The waveform on the screen changed, sharpening, separating the background wind from the foreground voices. Put the headphones on, he said. I hesitated. I didn't want to hear their voices. I wanted them to remain abstract villains on a spreadsheet. But I needed to know. I needed to hear the truth so I could never lie to myself again. I slid the headphones over my ears. Ethan hit the spacebar. At first, there was just the rush of wind and the distant crash of waves. Then, the distinct pop of a cork. To the SBA, my father's voice said, clear and slurring slightly. And to the idiot loan officer, who didn't check the signature, the clink of glass. Then my mother's laugh. It was the same laugh she used at cocktail parties when she was gossiping about a neighbor's foreclosure. High. Sharp. Cruel. Do you think she noticed the empty chairs yet? Susan asked. Who cares? Gregory replied. Let her play dress up. She wanted a wedding, we wanted a lifestyle. Priorities, Susan. I just hope she doesn't call, my mother sighed. I don't want to deal with her drama while I'm trying to relax. It's such a small life she leads. Trivial, my father corrected her. It's a trivial event for a trivial girl. She's lucky we let her use our last name. To Gabrielle's perfect credit score, my mother toasted. May it last as long as this bottle. Ethan hit the spacebar again. The audio cut out. The silence in the room was absolute. I took the headphones off slowly. I placed them on the desk. That word. Trivial. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a poor choice of words in a text message. It was their fundamental definition of me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource. I was a trivial little thing to be harvested, used up, and discarded so they could maintain the illusion of their grandeur. They had forged my name not out of desperation, but out of contempt. They believed they were entitled to steal my future because they didn't think my future mattered. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden I was trying to build. I looked at the gate I had installed. They aren't family, I said, my voice devoid of any tremor. They are liabilities. I turned back to Ethan. Save that clip. Save it in 3 different formats. And get the projector ready. You're inviting them over? Ethan asked. No, I said. I'm inviting them to their own liquidation. We scheduled the meeting for 7 o'clock. I didn't frame it as a family dinner. I framed it as a closing. Ethan set up the living room like a boardroom. He cleared the coffee table of magazines and coasters, leaving only the stack of printed evidence and the fraud affidavit. He positioned the projector on a side table, aiming it at the blank white wall above the fireplace. Are you ready? He asked, checking the HDMI connection. I've been ready since I was 6 years old, I said. When the doorbell rang, I didn't feel my pulse jump. I felt a strange, clinical calm. I opened the door. Gregory and Susan stood there, dressed for a country club dinner they probably couldn't afford anymore. They looked impatient, tapping their feet, expecting to grab a check and leave. We don't have all night, Gabrielle, Gregory said, brushing past me without a hello. Susan has a committee meeting at 8. Did you make the transfer? Have a seat, I said, pointing to the sofa facing the wall. We don't need to sit, Susan scoffed. Just give us the confirmation number so we can go. Sit down, Ethan said. His voice wasn't a request. It was a command. They sat, looking affronted. I took the armchair opposite them. Ethan dimmed the lights. What is this? Gregory demanded. Some kind of slideshow? We don't have time for. Ethan hit play. The room filled with the sound of wind and crashing waves. Then, the distinct pop of a cork. The audio was crystal clear. To the SBA. Gregory's voice boomed from the speakers. And to the idiot loan officer who didn't check the signature. Susan froze. Her hand went to her throat. On the wall, the projector displayed a split screen. On the left, the fraudulent loan application with the shaky, forged signature. On the right, the metadata from the video file timestamped to the exact moment of the toast. It's a trivial event for a trivial girl, the recording continued. She's lucky we let her use our last name. The silence that followed the clip was heavier than concrete. Susan looked at the wall, then at me, her eyes wide with terror. Gregory's face had drained of all color, leaving him looking gray and old. Where did you get that? He whispered. The cloud is an unforgiving place, Gregory, Ethan said. You deleted the file, but you didn't wipe the server. I leaned forward. That is federal wire fraud. That is identity theft. And that, I pointed to the affidavit on the table, is a sworn statement I prepared with a notary this morning, declaring that I did not sign for that loan. Gregory stood up, his hands shaking. You can't submit that. It would ruin us. I could lose my license. I could go to jail. Yes, I said. That is usually what happens to criminals. Gabrielle, please, Susan started crying, the same performance I'd seen 1,000 times. We were doing it for the family. We just needed a bridge loan. We were going to pay it back. You can't send your own father to prison. You didn't act like a father, I said. You acted like a predator. You toasted to my insignificance while spending the money you stole from my future. We can fix this, Gregory pleaded, the arrogance gone, replaced by a pathetic desperation. I'll sell the boat. I'll cash out the IRA. Just give us time. Don't file the report. Think about our reputation. Think about what people will say. He was begging now. He was reaching for my hand, trying to invoke a bond he had severed years ago. Please, Gabrielle, he said. Don't destroy us over something so small. Don't ruin our lives over a misunderstanding. I stood up. I looked down at them, huddled together on my couch, terrified not of losing me, but of losing their status. You have 24 hours, I said. Liquidate the house. Liquidate the cars. Sell the jewelry. I want the loan paid in full. And I want proof of the wire transfer by 7 p.m. tomorrow. If the balance isn't zero, I send the affidavit to the SBA and the police. But how will we live? Susan wailed. If we sell the house, where will we go? I walked to the door and held it open. Don't contact me about trivial matters, I said. They scrambled out into the night, stripped of their dignity, leaving only the echo of their own cruelty behind them. They made the deadline with 11 minutes to spare. At 6:49 p.m. the next day, Ethan's phone pinged. He refreshed the portal. The balance on the fraudulent SBA loan had dropped to zero. Paid in full. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt the quiet, heavy satisfaction of a structural engineer watching a controlled demolition go exactly according to plan. The danger was neutralized. The site was cleared. But in Scottsdale, you can't liquidate a life in 24 hours without people noticing. To come up with $92,000 in cash overnight, Gregory and Susan had to fire sale the very things that gave them their identity. The boat was sold to a used dealer for cash, thousands under market value. The country club membership they had held for 30 years was resigned and cashed out. And 3 days later, a for sale sign appeared on the lawn of their pristine stucco villa. In a town where status is the only currency that matters, they had just declared moral bankruptcy. The rumors started immediately. The whisper campaign they had launched against me backfired spectacularly. People whispered that Gregory was under investigation, that they were destitute, that they had been caught in a scheme. The invitations to galas stopped coming. The phone calls dried up. They were left alone in their big, emptying house, surrounded by the echoes of an image they could no longer afford to maintain. Even Olivia, my sister, didn't stick around to help them pack. She saw the ship sinking and jumped. 2 weeks later, she posted a video on her channel titled, Breaking Cycles, Why I Had to Cut Toxic Ties for My Mental Health. She didn't mention the fraud. She didn't mention that she had benefited from their spending. She simply threw them to the wolves to save her own brand. It was poetic justice. They had sacrificed their relationship with me to worship her, and in the end, she cannibalized them for content. I haven't spoken to any of them since. 6 months later, the air in my own backyard feels different. It doesn't feel thin anymore. It feels full. I stood on the back porch this morning, holding a mug of coffee, watching Ethan kneel in the soil. He was staking out a new section of the yard. We aren't just planting drought-tolerant shrubs this year, we are clearing a space for a swing set. I looked down at the blueprints on the table. It wasn't a landscape design for a client, it was a plan for a nursery. For a long time, I was afraid to start a family. I was terrified that the rot in my DNA was inevitable, that I would inherit their coldness, their transactional view of love. But looking at the life we built, brick by honest brick, I realized something fundamental. There is a statute of limitations on family loyalty. You do not owe your solvency to the people who are actively praying for your bankruptcy. You cannot bankroll people who view you as an asset to be liquidated. Biology is just an accident. It's a shared set of chromosomes. But family? Family is architecture. You choose the location. You pour the foundation. You select the materials. You decide who gets a key to the front door. And more importantly, you decide who is kept outside the gate. I am not a backup plan anymore. I am solid. I am solvent. And the family I am building now won't have to audit their worth to know they are loved. They will know it because I will show up, I will be in the front row, and I will never, ever, look through them to see someone else. If you've ever had to fire your own family to save your sanity, share your story in the comments. We are the architects of our own peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe.